John Hildreth, University of North Carolina. Charlotte.
Yeah.
With that, let's welcome John Hildreth. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Tim. As Tim said, my day job is UNC Charlotte, but I'm here today because I also happen to be the chair of the TRB AHD 60 Committee on Maintenance Equipment. And so I was just asked to give you a quick update on what's going on with the committee. I've only got 4 pieces I want to talk about in terms of what the committee has done or is doing and has done in the past year. We'll talk under those 4 headings. But one of the things that I struggle with, before we get into that, one of the things that I have given a lot of thought, and I think it plays well with George is out of the room, with what George just said. Collaboration, coordination, integration with other folks inside of maintenance, but also across transportation as a whole. And when I look at what is it that the TRB committee can provide, can do, within a group like this, which is a very active group. You guys have been extremely active in terms of getting research done, throwing out ideas, pushing things forward. Kudos to the folks that have done that over the past 10 years or so, because it is very impressive in terms of what's happened inside the equipment world and in research. Because you've got this group, the EMTSP, you've got the equipment twig, which Tim is chair of, and we heard George mention, didn't talk so much about it, but threw it out there. So there's this TSP, there's this TWG, this twig, and then there's this other group that's called TRB, and it's our AHD 60 committee. And so I look at that and I say, given that this is such an active group in terms of research, what is it that we can do as a TRB committee that's different than what happens here, that's different than what happened in Charlotte, or wherever the twig happens to be meeting? And because there's no reason, from my perspective, to duplicate efforts, let's add value. And what is it that we can do to add value? And so this is sort of what I came up with. If I look at the EMTSP, this group, it's a large group. I think the value that it brings is the activeness of the group, but the breadth of the group, the diversity. All the states can or are represented here, right? It's not just one person from a state. It's often lots of people from a state. And so you get different ideas. And I think that's the value that this group has, is its breadth and its diversity. And you look at a group like the equipment twig, and I look at that group and I go, what's the value there? Well, it's a smaller group, but it's a very focused group. They're very active. If you go to one of their meetings, you better show up to work, because Tim's going to put you to work. And I found out that they set times aside on the agenda, but he'll make you work outside those times. He doesn't care. But they're very strongly tied within the maintenance community of AASHTO. And I think that's a great value. And I look at TRB and what is it that we can do, because we're not a very broad, although anybody can join. We're not a very broad group in terms of state representation. We're not tightly tied with an AASHTO group, we have a section, but we're sort of cousins, I guess you might say, with other committees. Some have stronger relationships than others. So what is it that we bring? And I think one of the things that we bring is a very singular focus on research. And I think that we bring diversity in the group, in that it's not just DOT equipment managers. We have other folks in the room. We have academics in the room. We have consultants in the room. We have some equipment manufacturers in the room. There's what I've termed service providers. So a broad group, and I think we can continue to broaden that. We have the ability to bring in municipal, county level fleet managers. And I think there's a lot of things that we can do to bring other ideas in the room that they wouldn't necessarily, not that they would be unwelcome, but that they wouldn't necessarily join this group. And so when I look at sort of the equipment world, that's the way I see it. I'm open to any ideas you got if you see it differently. But I just wanted to throw that out as sort of a background. Okay, so what have we done in the past year? What's the committee done? One of the biggest things we did every 3 years, TRB forces committees to rotate a third of their membership off. So TRB committee is roughly 25 people. And you have to rotate off roughly a third, which would sound like 8, but it's not, because there's a lot of rules and loopholes. And anyway, bottom line is this. We rotated out the following folks. Forgive me if I get this wrong, but I think his name was Jim Smith. And I thought it was Jim. I met him years ago. He was the former chair of the committee before Lisa. I think that's right. He was the chair. No, wasn't him? I got my history wrong. Anyway, Jim's been on the committee. I've never met Jim, apparently. Is he here? My apologies. Hope to have a chance to catch up then. I had you listed as the committee chair. Okay, so other folks we fan in academic rolled off: Bruce Erickson, you guys know Bruce, Jim Edgerton, Danny Keene, and Leslie Mix. Leslie retired. Danny's been on the committee so long, TRB forced me to shove him off. There's a limit on how long you can be on a committee. So nothing personal against any of these people other than we have to rotate some folks. We brought in some folks, John White, Jason Krause, Ian Burden with Alamo Group. I don't know if Ian's here. I don't know if he's in the room. And Michael Martin from PennDOT. And you'll notice that the departing list is longer than the incoming list. That is not intentional. There were some folks that had indicated they would join and then didn't, and that's fine. Other things come up. But what that means is we have some opportunities for folks to join the committee. There are some slots on the committee, and we can put some folks on there. If you have a very real interest in that, see me, talk to me, we got a lot of folks on the committee in the room. I would start to name names, but I would miss some and it wouldn't be fair. If you're under 35, you can come in as a young member. 35 is the magic number for a young member. I said the committee is like 25, but you can have, I think, 5 young members and 5 international members in addition to the 25. So there's lots of rules, right? But if you are interested, see me. If you know somebody that might be interested, that's not necessarily a DOT, or a DOT is fine, but if they're not even, right? If they're a young member, if they're interested in fleet and equipment, young members, if they're from an international organization, if they're an equipment manufacturer, that's one of the things that we think we can bring is to the table is an opportunity to bring in OEMs, opportunities to bring in some of the service providers and public equipment managers. We talked about that. So if you know of folks that you think would be good at sitting on a committee, the purpose of which we'll talk about here in just a second, but is really to push research in terms of equipment, maintenance equipment, let me know. Okay, we have some opportunities. It's not and we can talk about the time requirements and that sort of thing. The second thing we did, and I promise I won't read this, the second thing we did was update our triennial strategic plan. Okay, and I put this up here because this is our new committee scope. And so, talk about membership and folks that might be interested. This is the scope of the committee as slightly revised. We just did a little wordsmithing. What I'll say is it's very broad. We're focused on all aspects of equipment, and we're focused on lots of different areas, and you see them. I'm getting to that age where I'm having to lean back to read. Technologies, regulations, sustainability, all kinds of stuff in there. All pieces of equipment, lots of different areas in equipment, and research very broadly. We're interested in doing research, we're interested in finding out what research has been done, and we're very interested in making sure that gets disseminated and implemented. And so a very broad look at that. The second piece, and probably most importantly in terms of our triennial strategic plan, was we had to look at the world and see what we thought was important. When I say we, the committee. We looked at the world in 2 dimensions. Short-term, long-term, and then what's within our scope and outside of our scope. What do we think is important? And that's what we came up with. Things that are practically here that we think are related to what the committee does. You see connected vehicles and equipment. That has come up over and over in almost every conversation we've had. Environmentally friendly vehicles and equipment, which was a slight wording change. That's not just alternative fuels and emissions. It's sort of all of that rolled into one, right? So different ways of looking at vehicle and equipment and how they're environmentally sustainable. One of the things, and there's a lot of play coming around in this, is big data. You guys produce massive piles of data. I don't know of anybody that is using the big data and really doing true big data analytics on it. There's a big push for this inside of the maintenance group of TRB. If you have an interest in that, I'd like to talk to you about that, because there is a push and some opportunities to do some stuff. But how do we analyze it? How do we use it? There's lots of algorithms and processes out there to work with the data that you're already producing. The other one that we think is here right now is the regulatory requirements. That's the very short version. The gist is lots of changes, lots of requirements, lots of changes. How do you keep up, and how do you stay in compliance with them? In terms of the long-term stuff, we see that the connected moves more towards the automated side of vehicles and equipment. That's going to be a little bit down the road, although not very far. And what's the impact to the maintenance equipment, the fleet, and in lots of different ways. There's lots of ways to look at that impact. And then once we start to have this connected and automated stuff, how secure is it? And how resilient are the systems so that when something happens, you can still respond and meet the needs of your constituents? Okay? And then outside of our scope, sort of the things that we see equipment playing with, workforce development. This is a big conversation inside of maintenance, transportation maintenance, and I've heard it from a number of people inside the equipment world. How do you find and train and maintain and keep the folks that maintain the fleet, the mechanics? We've talked to fleet managers in the past, but a lot of this is around the mechanics because of the technology of the equipment. But there's also a much larger conversation going on around maintenance workers as a whole. Work zone safety. How does the equipment communicate and play with other stuff, including the traveling public, so that we can maintain work zone safety? And then even longer, bigger term is sort of artificial intelligence, machine learning, that sort of stuff that we think are going to be the things that impact maintenance equipment fleets. One of the things that we did was we established a research subcommittee. Lisa's our chair. We've got a couple of folks helping her. The TRB, Transportation Research Board, research is literally their middle name. And so that's really our focus. And so research needs are important. What do we do with those? It's much like the ideas you guys are throwing around, right? It's one of the reasons I really like coming to this meeting is I get lots of ideas and I steal those and use them shamelessly. One of the things we want to do is start archiving the ideas that don't move forward, that don't float forward, or whatever the term was, that aren't necessarily moving right away, so that they don't go away and get lost, that they're in a place that people can find them, and then develop new ideas. And I made this very short list of ideas that have been floating around for a while. So we're going to work on our research needs. And then this is sort of a push from TRB for our committee, but it's also sort of a personal thing. I think we've got to improve our communications and our website and how the committee communicates amongst ourselves, but also amongst this larger group. To the point where the number one task is to bring our website current. It's so bad I wouldn't put a URL in this presentation because you shouldn't go there. Okay, I mean, it's that old. We will fix that. We're going to work to facilitate interaction amongst the committee, or not interaction with the committee, so that you guys know who we are and what we do. You know what's going on in terms of research that's been completed. I know there's a lot of things that happen at different states that doesn't come out. And then how do we share new ideas and new needs as well, right? And we had this conversation amongst a bigger maintenance group last week, bigger TRB maintenance group last week in Charlotte. And one of the questions that came up was, everybody's talking about, well, we want to update our website and we want to include relevant information and blah, blah, blah. And somebody said, well, how do you know what's relevant? I mean, how do you know what folks need? What are they looking for and where are they looking to find it now? And so that's a question that I would ask you. You and the people that you work with in your group, what is the information you're looking for? What is it you go look for? Not just right now, but in a regular day-to-day business sort of thing that TRB might be able to help you with. And where are you going to look for it now? Because if it exists somewhere now, I don't have much interest at all in recreating it. I do have an interest in linking to it. Okay? So where are the places you guys are going to get info, and what are you looking for? I would be interested in hearing from you guys in that regard. In a nutshell, that's what we're doing this year, what we've done this year, and who we are. I'd answer any questions if we got time, or however you want to do it, Tim. Okay. Thank you, guys.
The preceding was produced by the National Center for Pavement Preservation. More information can be found on the web at pavementpreservation.org. Additional support provided by Michigan State University.